But please join me in welcoming again Adele Horne and Doug Goodwin. Hopefully Doug will make it. Give everybody another moment to settle. I don't know, it's hard to come up with questions easily. It's just sort of like going on perceptually in my mind. But here.
Stay here.
No, calm down. So people's mind, so people don't use the peripheral vision.
Yeah, that. Hate that.
Okay. So one, just observation, I guess, and hopefully it can inspire you, is that all of the works tonight, one reason I thought they work together is they're all working for me with this sort of triple tension, and one is that of, how would I put it, the physiological limits of vision, and then the physical limits of media to represent vision, and then our desire to have the media go beyond what its limits are. And each of the pieces work with that in different ways. Well, the last one's different. But. So I just want to see what elements of that, do you agree with that observation, and then what elements of it was that in your initiation of these projects, or did it come to you through the making of them? We go in alphabetical order. I don't know.
I think that's a great way of putting it. And the lossless stuff started out being, we were really interested in what the actual difference was between film and digital media. So the more we picked it apart, the more it became as well about perception and how we receive digital media. So it kind of got more complex the further we went into the project.
Yeah, I really got interested in this whole psychophysics thing, where we actually we start to understand how we perceive things and how this is being represented in digital media. And I wanted to take it apart. I just wanted to see how it worked. And it led to all these crazy experiments. And, it turns out that digital media is pretty weird, the way it represents things. It's pretty interesting.
And Adele?
Yeah, I think it is a good way to put it. I think for me, maybe it resonates most with the peripheral vision film for me, because partly that was an excuse, I guess, to do a lot of experiments on myself, but just experientially with how I perceived peripheral vision and trying things out. And I thought about, the form it should take, and I felt like doing it as a 16mm film that is, is a very small kind of box and doesn't allow, it's not like you could do it as an installation where you could actually use peripheral vision, and it seemed interesting to butt up against that restraint of the medium as a way to maybe point to peripheral vision. So yeah, and I think it's probably present in the film as well.
I mean, it's just expanding beyond that point, Doug and Rebecca. Did you find then that there were limits in what digital media could represent that you couldn't break through? That I don't know whether they frustrated you or you just wanted to stop dealing with it.
I mean, it was so profoundly about limitation, but it produced something else. And so, by working with Ernie Gersering Velocity in #4, which is a film. Many of you have probably seen it, but it's all about optics and filmed space, and we looked at it through this other lens. It was all about vectors and a completely graphical representation of that same space, so it allowed us to think through what was happening in the performance of digital. It also made us really think about digital media as performed rather than recorded and projected. So that piece to me, in a way, speaks mostly to what we
That's interesting, because actually my next question was, how did you make lossless #4? So it's appropriate, because, who here has seen Serene Velocity? Actually be appropriate. So, well, that means about half of you haven't, but it was 16 frames per second, though, right, as well? Shots down a hallway using further ends of the zoom and sort of like beating back and forth the lights as well. So going from that, how did you then actually technically create these vectors?
I'll just say one thing about the version that we worked off of. Many of you probably know about UbuWeb, which is a kind of controversial website for many filmmakers because of the presentation of their the conditions under which their films are presented and other reasons. But there was a version of Serene Velocity on UbuWeb, which is the version we worked from. And it's almost a 30-minute film, but because it was shown at 30 frames per second on UbuWeb, it cut it in a third of the film. It's a third shorter. So we decided to actually stick with what UbuWeb gave us to work with rather than try to rectify the length. So the source was also important for us in all of these cases. We can maybe talk about what it's showing.
Well, yeah, that source is really interesting because you normally wouldn't ever see anything like that. Maybe you would, I don't know. But it's part of MPEG-2, part of DVD videos. One of the things that's going on in it is that it analyzes motion, and it only updates the part of the frame where the motion is occurring, right? And the way that it does that is with these crazy vectors. So those vectors are happening all the time when you're watching DVDs, and whenever this vector passes through, it tells that part of the image to update, right? So in those parts of the image where you just saw sort of points, no arrows at all, those bits weren't being updated in between the frames. So in the original, those things stayed exactly the same. So
the background dots.
Yeah,
okay.
the background dots.
Mhm.
So that also explains why you can kind of see the hallway in it if you know the film well. You will see it. Believe it or not, people have actually recognized it. Maybe some of you tonight did. I don't know. But yeah, that's what you're seeing. So we opened up the codec a little bit to see just that analysis, just those arrows, and then threw the rest away and just showed the arrows.
Oh, we're fine.
Okay, great.
We have a gentleman who came in here and I think he's maybe a little bit lost.
All right. And then from what other pieces, so that one's your source for Serene Velocity. Why did you pick your other source films for the lossless set? Out of the searchers and meshes.
With the
In Berkeley.
searchers, we were interested in how because things that don't move in the frame don't get updated, and we thought of searchers as a great example where you have these incredible landscapes and things passing through. So we started thinking about it formally, and when we looked at what happened I kind of need to talk about how it was made in order to explain why we chose these particular sources.
Please.
But so in the searchers piece in lossless number 3, we learned that the way the file works is that anything that doesn't change from frame to frame doesn't get updated. It only gets fully updated every 48 frames. So when we took away the keyframes, the updating you could see actually what was being updated and what wasn't. So anything moving that wasn't getting updated just became this smeary blur. So the backgrounds would stay relatively crisp, and so the searchers was kind of an obvious choice. And also it suggested things just about landscape painting that sort of looked.
Yeah, no, it seemed like a really great choice because it makes this whole comment about the West and tearing it up, and sort of inadvertently becomes this comment about the film itself, and you can kind of reimagine what was happening there, and you have to construct it even more than you would just watching a DVD, right? But it's quite easy. You still see the horses, you still see Indians, you see cowboys, even though it's all sort of blurring together. We can kind of make them out still. It's sort of fascinating that way too. Plus, it's really beautiful still. You get the landscape.
I agree. And meshes? Talk about the choice of meshes as well, how you manipulated them.
We were interested also in how avant-garde films were circulating on the internet, and that these things that had been shown historically in very limited venues with small audiences were suddenly available in this totally different format. And because of Mesh's own history and the way it was actually quite widely distributed by my dad, we were interested in how it was circulating online, and the material you see is culled from 7 different downloads of that BitTorrent file that we then very heavily edited. But we didn't do anything. We didn't do any compositing or anything like that. It was just what a BitTorrent file looks like while it's still downloading, because it doesn't download in sequence, it downloads bit by bit. And we did it many times and just pulled the kind of richest material from it and then reimagined it, trying to keep to some of the circular narrative logic of the original, but really reshaping it because it's obviously much, much shorter than the original film.
I don't even, what program do you even use to like take pieces of a BitTorrent file? Is it, I mean, just after it's downloaded?
It was
you're not
in the
editing?
product before it finished, so.
And you cut off and still see what
Yeah.
quality arrived.
Yeah. You can grab it if you have the right tools.
So what is the right tool?
To make your own.
And Adele, please tell us a bit more about the first film that opened the evening and how you found this place. and so forth.
Don't Quiero Ver, that was filmed in the Mojave Desert. I had met someone when I was making The Tailenders, a documentary about missionaries. I had met a sociologist of religion who happened to know about this event that had taken place in the Mojave Desert for, I think, about 20 years. A woman sees visions of the Virgin Mary and the Sun, and then people come and look. Now it's kind of developed that people take pictures of the sun and see, interpret those images. So they invited me to go out and see it. So I just thought it was a beautiful event. I liked how it's kind of do-it-yourself spiritual practice. To me, it almost seemed like a do-it-yourself art practice. That it was people taking images and interpreting them together. And it was very full of sharing. Everybody wanted to look at each other's photos and see what they saw in them. And they're really quite beautiful photographs too.
Many people look at a photo and say, like, I just see the sun. Do they not see things?
Nobody said that really. No. Kind of just, nod and. But it's interesting. Mostly the Polaroids work out really well. Polaroid cameras take the best pictures. And part of it is the shape of the aperture inside. There's a kind of rectangular shape, and so I think you see some that are like that. They call it the gate of heaven. So it works really well. All the people also use video cameras, and you may have seen in cell phone cameras. With the video cameras, you get this kind of pulsing image of the sun, and people talked about how the Virgin was dancing. It was a pulsing image. So I really liked it.
Now, did that lead in some way to which came first, that piece or the last film I saw? At the Image World.
The Image World, I was already working on that. I was working on that over a period of time, and I think actually I was telling a friend who was a sociologist of religion about the Peripheral Vision film, and then he mentioned this, which sort of went with it in some way, because I was interested in researching about the Peripheral Vision film. I was thinking about spirit photography and all those photographs you take of something that's not there, or like it's there but it's only visible once you see the photograph. And I was thinking about that whole phenomenon, and he mentioned this, and I thought, well, maybe that would be part of it. And then I realized now it's this whole other thing, and so it kind of came out of the Peripheral Vision film in a way. But there's a coincidence of just the sun theme in those two, which is a happy coincidence.
Please, I'll open it up to all of you now. Anybody here have any questions, technical, physiological, physiological?
Rebecca and Doug, I was wondering if you could speak about the process that you did to the audio, particularly the number 2 and number 5. Because it sounds like you were processing it somehow in a similar way to what you were doing with the image.
I'm really glad you asked that question, because a really wonderful musician and sound engineer named Ernst Carroll did the sound for those 2 pieces, and we had a conversation with him about what we were working with in the image, and gave him the original tracks from their sources, and he came up with a kind of analogous treatment in the sound. It's not a literal treatment. He didn't literally follow what we were doing digitally, but it's an interpretation of what we were doing.
Was there some kind of processor that he was using on the soundtrack? Do you know what the process was that he did?
It's a granular synthesis. So he basically broke the sound up, the original sound. We gave him the tracks, and it's synced to the image from the films. He took that and he broke it up into millions of tiny little sound grains, and then fattened each grain up till so it crossed over a neighboring grain, and it creates this kind of wonderful ambience from that, because you kind of hear things coming, and then you still hear things from 5 minutes ago, and it sort of moves through, but, you know, you get it all at once. It's great.
I have a question for Adele. On part 15 of peripheral vision, I found that very interesting because you're quite generous to the viewers in cluing us in as to where you are each step of the way so we can play along with you. And so I found that one very interesting because it's just presented. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I kind of felt like that maybe was the culmination of viewing. At that point, hopefully you're feeling ready to just examine the frame kind of on your own and sort of experience, you know, how your eye moves around the frame, or what catches your eye. Yeah, I was just sort of interested in landscape and a large view where you really can't take in everything at once. You have to kind of pick and choose and move around.
It draws a parallel more with the astronomer, or the pieces, and then also the the iLab experiments where you're doing that, which are different they're different from the peripheral vision elements as well.
Well, for me, it was linked just because the thing I find interesting about peripheral vision, I mean, when I started learning how small our sharp vision really is, it just was kind of staggering to realize how little we actually see clearly, that most of the things are pretty blurry, and that so we don't, you know, we really do have to kind of pick and choose at any moment what we're going to see with clear vision. And so I felt like it was also kind of about, you know, this the lacunae vision and what we just have to guess at, you know, and kind of make up stories about or imagine. And I liked, I don't know, there's a kind of longing, I guess, that's part of that. It's about not getting to see it all and never getting to see everything once.
So on that topic, in the first section, I think, where they're describing what they're seeing in their peripheral vision. I mean, the one who keeps talking about John and Paul and Loka, did he know what was? I mean, was he making? I mean, did he know what was out there that he wasn't looking at? How did he know? Or did he just imagine seeing John and Paul and Loka?
I had a couple of people acting things out really on the side of them. So there were people, they had come up with, you know, kind of play acting that they would do, and he would have to interpret and we would have to interpret. So there were real events happening, yeah, that they just had to see.
Yeah, I just wanted to say about the Lossless series. I find it really interesting that, in a way, by using this digital processing, you also came to some kind of a phenomenological essence of the cinematic as well, which is, you know, actually the pleasure in cinema is not only, you know, the story, although that's so fascinating, but, you know, just this compositing and composition of movement and of lines and, you know, just this abstract kind of planes, you know, put together. So I just really enjoy that, and I was wondering if that was your goal as well, or, you know, just if you can talk about that.
Sure. Yeah. One of the things I really learned, or we sort of discovered while we were doing the piece, is that, you know, there's a big difference between film and video. And sort of one of the really huge ones is that, you know, film is slapping images out there, you know, discrete images, and there's a sort of a break in between, so it's this kind of flicker that's happening. Video, all that's erased, and we sort of enhance the effect by pulling out the keyframes and letting the video just kind of flow. You know, the colors and images, there's no break, and it sort of appeals to our sensory systems and our perception likes it. And it's one of these great hacks that, you know, the engineers came up with to represent video and put it on a little silver disc. And it's really great, and I love it, and let's see more of it.
Yeah, I have a comment about that. It just seemed very, you know, it reminded me of painting in a way, because it had this kind of like entropy where everything was just sort of dripping and flowing, and it had a kind of beginning, middle, and end to it that felt very like physical and gravity oriented in a way.
Is there a reason that the lossless videos were shown off of a computer rather than off of like a tape or something?
The compression is really hard on the material, so we've had, every time we've shown this work, we've had to remake the media because the conditions have been never done. And it looks very, very different, whether it's coming off of a DV tape or a digi-beta tape or we're actually working on putting number 4, the vector one, onto film because it looks like this kind of perverse return to the to a sort of homage to the original. But because it's so much about compression, the additional compression, it's really alters the experience in the media.
And that does it, when it does change the media by compressing it further, in what way does it change it from your previous example if you haven't like to show?
All different things happen. Yeah. Sometimes it can't play. Especially number 4 is so labor intensive for the processor that like it won't play on my older laptop, but it'll play on its newer laptop. You know, so some of it just has to do with the speed of the technology, but it gets softer, or also depending on the projector, you get that spectral thing happening sometimes, and the flicker is really different depending. These are also all PAL files, and they play really differently as NTSC files. So it's been a real learning experience every single time we play it. So, yeah.
On the front corner there?
I really didn't have fun with the vector because without my glasses I don't see very well. I suppose other people do this too. And I was almost getting headaches trying to focus on the little areas. I take my glasses off and there's much more pleasant. And I put back on and it'll be different.
Yes, some other hand.
One more question for Adele. What was the, it looked like a sort of computer chat room or something? What was the sort of subject that got that conversation started?
It was shadow people. I was interested in kind of the idea of peripheral vision, the spirit world are the kind of things you sense but you can't see, you know, not there. And the way that is sort of part of, I think a lot of times people, I don't know if you've had this experience, but you sort of feel like you see a ghost or you see something that's there, you turn and there's movement or something there. So I was kind of looking for people talking about that. I just kind of went online with that in chat rooms where people, I had heard there was, I guess, Art Bell, there was a show on shadow people, and so I knew that term. I just found different sites and put them together.
That's great.
I wonder if you thought at all about, because in that final shot, I kept seeing, well, I didn't know what it was. Like, I didn't know if it was a speck of dust on the film in the projection, or if it was like my own little, you know, like those little floaters, or if it was something that actually was in the frame. And I wonder if you thought at all about the medium, you know, of film and artifacts that, you know, kind of in a vein to what Rebecca and Doug were dealing with, artifacting on the reverse, if you thought about, because it made me think about that chat room conversation.
Yeah.
And so if you thought at all about artifacts on the film, like the dust or the hair that could get on it, or something in the gate, or, you know, and how that affects peripheral vision or perception, if that even crossed your mind, or as
yeah,
you're
you know, I
making.
hadn't really thought that much about it, but that's a really good point. I mean, I think that, well, I guess it gets dirtier, just adding to the perceptions. But yeah, that's really interesting to think
Because
about.
I'd sort of see something and I was like, did I, or was that a fly?
I mean, they're birds.
That was the thing, I was like, is that a fly or a bird?
It could be dirt.
Did the fluid front, or, you know, or was that dust on the lens, or was that just my own, like,
That's
eye
interesting.
hallucinating?
Rebecca, I just wanted to say that I'm a big fan of your work because as an archivist, I've seen a trend in multiple films that they reflect the concerns of not only of archivists and preservationists, but those interested in that. And I think these films really sort of, maybe not intentionally, but evoked a fear, is my personal, a fear of sort of how to deal with digital materials and sort of the materiality of the digital images, especially The Searchers, I think, because it's such an iconic film, and seeing it played with in that way, in a very specific way, very choice way, only working with the really specific, images are the heart of the design. It was very effective for me. I don't know if that was in any way intentional, but it worked, and that worked.
Well, I mean, it's definitely a concern of mine too, and coming from film background, still working in film, but also working digitally, the experience of projection and exhibition specifically was so profoundly different that that was also part of making this work. And it's nice to hear that you see the relationship between my earlier work and this work, because I think it's there, but it's so different in form. It's nice that you picked up on it, because I feel like it's there too.
Well, I haven't. I was looking for it.
But I want to expand on a question there, which is, of course, the issue of archiving in the digital world. And you talk about how you have to re-render or recreate these pieces each time. So obviously the lossless series are going to, disappear at some point. If you don't have a way to, transform the film, that'll be different. And, if you're not around to keep rendering them in 5 years, there will be ghosts. And I was wondering if you thoughts about that. Ephemerality of them, or you can attempt to preserve them in some manner, and if so, how?
I think it's such a fundamental issue with digital media. Like, what is the archival format? And even these things, they feel fleeting. Even the way we can capture the BitTorrents, it feels really like everything's just moving. It's very different than a reel on a shelf.
Jen?
First, I wanted to thank the three of you for a really beautiful and thought-provoking evening. And I'm interested in the question of framing when you're dealing with non-narrative or non-overtly documentary work. And I'm interested, for instance, in how you chose, Adele, in the Peripheral Vision film, how you chose when to make titles and when not to, and how to direct. I mean, you literally direct sort of a collective reading practice at certain points, both in terms of what we're thinking about and how you're framing the images, but also literally on the screen. And then I'm also interested, Doug and Rebecca, in how you decide what to say in the program notes in terms of how that frames the viewing experience, and if you've ever chosen to show this work without program notes, or just as what it is, so some people may or may not recognize where the films came from or what the process is.
Who wants to answer first?
Well, we did show it once without having any program notes, and I felt okay about that, but a lot of people don't like it. I think it's fine just to walk in and see it, because you will recognize something, and I appreciate the opportunity as a viewer not to be told what to look for. So, we just had titles, and they're not very telling, as you know, lossless number 2. Okay. So I think that's fine, although we've gotten some feedback about that wasn't very nice. So.
I just want to add a small thing to that, which is that when we saw what was happening visually, that's why we decided to make the work, that it wasn't about a kind of technical demonstration, and so we didn't want a kind of demo to be the mode for the work, but it enhances the experience to know something about it. But I'd like to think people can just experience the work without reading the notes, and they read them after. But I hope the work's not dependent on that, but it's definitely a different experience with more information.
Yeah, I think deciding what text to include was hard, but felt like I wanted, I guess because I was really interested in the experience of doing these experiments, the process of doing them myself, I wanted to share some of that experience with you. So, even kind of failed attempts, so that's why I
And why not include your, like, for the segment on the train where you're describing what's out the window, and you could have done that alternatively with voice describing. And
I
why
did
did you
try
choose
that, and then I decided against it. It was partly that it was so shocking to suddenly hear a voice, you know, in the middle of all of this. And then I decided I really liked reading the text, that it kind of, I think it frees up your imagination to imagine the picture. I mean, I see the picture quite clearly in my head just with the text, and so I think you don't have to deal with the personality of the voice and the text maybe.
Madison?
I just had one comment and one question. You had mentioned at the beginning about the kind of pairing of the works being, I don't know, informative or interesting. I really liked how in the movie Dr. Vision, I mean, I guess the audience are always kind of performers whenever you're watching a film, but it's like really explicit in that one. Look here, you know, you're performing experiments. And then, so then the question is, in the Lossless series, then, if I understand this correctly, you're saying that those are kind of happening live. That they almost exist as files, but not as recorded media, so to speak. They're kind of being performed for the projector. Is that accurate?
Well, digital media is always kind of, well, if it's not on tape, it is being performed. So, yeah, but it's not anything that's not happening when you play quick time on a computer.
If we reveal that that's happening, and it's very extreme, because it could be quite different based on where it's being performed, as it were. But yeah, it's always happening. It's just a factor.
Well, but I mean, okay, so I mean, I know it's a question of degree. I mean, a film doesn't happen until it runs through the projector, so on and so forth. But I guess the question is then, is it like a, sorry, I don't have as much language about this as you. Is it like a codec that's being read more than like, I mean, that's kind of like whatever any digital media is, but.
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of this, yes, a film isn't really a film kind of when it's a real, it's this possibility, but we know that every single frame is, there are little photographs there, and with digital media, it's a performance of a set of instructions, and that's a really profound, for me, a very profound difference in just thinking about what the work is and also how we experience it. So that became more and more an issue, especially as we started trying to project it different ways and different formats. We've shown the Maya Deren piece on the tiny iPod screen as well, and that's also a very different experience. It's kind of singular, experience that is only possible because of this kind of media.
Yeah, so I guess for me the rich thing that happened in the programming was that, you know, just thinking about viewing as a kind of live experience, even when you're dealing with records.
Well, by extension, one could say that the hero or the protagonist of a video projection, or particularly yours, is, you know, the processor of the computer. The video to a lesser degree.
I just wanted to say that I really appreciated your programming decision in the order that you placed the pieces, because I think Lossless 4 is pretty hard going, and to see it after Adele's film, where we're really thinking about how we see and really examining the whole frame, made it more enjoyable for me as a viewer. And I've seen it many times, and so I really loved seeing it after seeing your film, where I felt so aware of my impact.
Is there any other questions? Well, we will be able to continue one-on-one conversation in the courtyard over drinks, but thank you all very much for joining us this evening.